against President William Ruto's administrations until concerns regarding electoral fraud, high cost of living, among other issues are addressed. 11 days down, 3 more to go before the lapse of the 14-day ultimatum issued by Raila Odinga to President William Ruto. The head of state, on the other hand, insists that the government will not be intimidated by the ultimatums. Brace yourselves for an expose by Kenya's second-in-command. The Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua, has threatened to expose senior government officials who served in the previous administration of retired President Uhuru Kenyatta for alleged theft of public resources. For these and other political and governance issues in the country, I will be speaking to Dismas Mukua, a political analyst, and Mark Bichachi, a communications strategist. We analyze the state of the nation, and that conversation is coming your way. As always, we welcome your views and opinion at KTN News KE, at George Maringa _ use the hashtag checkpoint. Gentlemen, thank you so much for making time for us and coming to our show tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Great, and I'll pick your minds immediately from what is, so transpiring today. The Deputy President has stated that, he will unleash names of those who looted what he called, funds, and he described in a manner, in quite a mainly descriptive manner, how the said funds were, taken away. I'll begin with you, Bichachi. Your quick thoughts towards that.
Well, I think first and foremost that the government should be applauded anytime it's fighting corruption. We applauded Uhuru Kenyatta's government when it did so, and we'll applaud William Ruto's government when it does so. We only pray and hope that Kamata Friday will come back, and the people who looted, if at all they did, need to be arrested as quickly as possible. However, we cannot continue to use corruption and stories of corruption as political gimmicks and political tools to settle scores, which, interestingly enough, both the former opposition, which is now in power, and the people now in opposition who were in power then complain about the same thing. They complain about the fact that they have been targeted unfairly for the simple reason as for opposing the government. So if it is a case about politics, Kenyans are not interested. But if it's a case about catching those who are capable, putting them behind bars, then Kenyans are very interested in those people being arrested, and there should be no sacred cows that cannot be sacrificed on the altar of purging this country of corruption.
Wouldn't you think that, for such a heavy accusation, that perhaps you would also say he will involve the DCI if possible, and the investigations will be launched? Is that an opinion you hold?
Well, I suspect where the Deputy President, Honorable Rigathi Gachagua, sits, he probably has got access to a lot of information.
Yes.
And in fact, every single Kenyan knows that corruption is a cancer. You would recall not long time ago, the former Chief of Staff and Head of Public Service, Mr. Joseph Kinyua, indicated that in fact a third of our budget goes to corruption. A member of the National Assembly and Senate also indicated that corruption is actually domiciled in the budgeting process. That this corruption in Kenya, therefore, is not anything new. Yes. Even former President Kenyatta, at some stage, indicated that Kenya loses up to 2 billion shillings per day. So it seems that we lose a lot of money. But I think for the Kenya Kwanza administration, since they've got this information and the revelations, even at the National Assembly last week, that a few days to the elections, and even when the presidential petition was at the Supreme Court, that money was actually not moved, but carted away.
Yeah.
And by some people who are now said to be sponsoring the demonstrations. In my view, if those people are known, then they should go through the entire legal process, through the law enforcement agencies that are investigated, and then if found guilty, they should be behind bars. Because the amount of money that the DP is talking about is actually obscene. You cannot, for a normal Kenyan, you can't even begin to quantify the amount of money which has been cutted, which has been stashed. Now, if there are people who are engaged in that act, and they're using those resources to finance the demonstrations, then they should be behind bars. They should go through the entire process. But again, we can't afford to use corruption as a political tool. Because if these people use those resources, which were meant for Kenya, the food security, which were meant for housing security, healthcare security, and they decided to cut away the resources, and now they're being used to finance demonstrations, then they should be behind bars. In fact, one would easily say that those architects of those acts are the people behind the high cost of living. So they shouldn't have the luxury of having a single malt whiskey every day and pepper steak while the rest of Kenyans are suffering.
Bichachi, you mentioned, not indulging politics in this whole issue. And I'm curious to find out, because this is an administration whose, talk almost weekly, or rather every weekend, has been an attack on the previous, administration. And the pundits have argued, even online I saw a comment by one of the viewers who said they need to focus now on the future. And at what point do you draw, as the deputy president, as an administration, that attacks on the previous administration will continue, and also focusing on the promises that you made? Because it appears, because there's some are saying that they should focus on what they promised Kenyans.
They say that the character that takes you to the top is not necessarily what keeps you at the top. The government we have today rose to power by making sure the Kenyans, and most especially those in central Kenya, considered Uhuru Kenyatta a villain. They rose to the top off of the wings of every step that former President Kenyatta made. They accused him. They made sure that the public thought that Uhuru Kenyatta was indeed the cancer that was wrong with this country. Give it to them. It worked. Today, they are the leadership of this country. Now, there is a bit of wishing the past could continue. There's a bit of the character they had during campaigns continuing. There's a bit of the desire to instead deal with the very hard issues of governance and giving answers to governance questions, and instead put the blame at the foot of Uhuru Kenyatta. After all, you have already been shown by how people voted that they clearly bought into the idea that he was the villain of the day. So there is a desire to live in the past, to have deja vu moments where you want to relive the past and blame Uhuru Kenyatta. Now, that strategy may hold water for a while people are angry at Uhuru. But at some point it would unravel. And I've said this before. If you get a spouse, whether a male or female, and you got them because you told them Maringa is a bad boyfriend. Maringa is the worst boyfriend you can get. Have you seen how he cuts his hair? That is terrible haircut. And then you are in the house, you've finally gotten this lady and you've married her. Then every day in the house where she's looking for the pepper steak Dismas likes to talk about, and she can't find it, you say, the pepper steak that used to be in this fridge was eaten by your ex-boyfriend Maringa. The next day she wants tea, you say Maringa was here before and he ate the tea as well, he drank the tea. And that kind of ideology cannot hold.
They hit the ground running, and they've been cleaning tables. When they took office, Kenya was fiscal indisciplined, talking about the debt and everything else. So things had actually gone haywire, but they've managed to clean the table, and now things are looking cool. So had they just decided to focus on what has happened in the past, and then they don't look at the future, then one would have a good reason to blame them, that you are driving using the rearview mirror instead of looking at the future. But they've been looking at the future. In fact, some of the economic policies which have been executed by Kenya Kwanza have received red attention by the Bretton Woods institutions. They're happy with the fiscal discipline, and even the international markets are very happy with the predictability of our fiscal policies. So on that space, you give them a credit. But again, when you speak to an accounting student, they've got the management accounting, which I've just spoken about, looking at the future, and then they've got financial accounting, looking at the past, auditing things. So it's important for Kenya Kwanza to keep on reminding Kenyans how we got to where we are today. So it would be a mistake if they kept on reminding us every single day how we got to where we are today, and they're not looking at the future. And I suspect at some stage now, having made Kenyans understand why the economy is bleeding, they'll put it in the past and let the law enforcement agencies deal with anybody by acts of omission or commission, anybody who may have broken the law, anybody who would have threatened our national security and our economic security as they look at the future. Because the ordinary man in the streets, when you speak to Mura, well, Mura is keen to know what happened in the past, but right now, our priority is food security, healthcare security, and housing security. Because Mura says, while you are running for office, you should have known the status and you should have come up with policy prescriptions. So you implement those policy prescriptions as I start having my 3 square meals a day, as I develop capacity to pay my fees, Medicare, and everything without struggling, then I look at the people who are responsible for mismanaging the past. Because if you do not look for people who have mismanaged Kenya's politics in the past and economy in the past, you will be promoting impunity. People will know that you can commit murder and go home without a fight. So it's important for anybody who has committed errors of either omission or commission to take responsibility. However, the premium or priority should be making sure that you turn around the economy so that on average when Kenyans wake up in the morning, they do not suffer from these insecurities. That should be the priority.
Gentlemen, the 14-day ultimatum for Azimio One Kenya leader Raila Odinga to lapse is coming to an end. 11 days gone. It was a 14-day ultimatum. When you look at the calls and the rallies that have been having across the country since then, first of all, are we at a time where, when you look at mature democracies and compared to ours, that is Kenyan, such ultimatums would be otherwise being taken so seriously, and perhaps you would be seeing conversations appearing, but it also depends, to each their own. But do you think that that ultimatum issued by Raila Odinga was perhaps a wake-up call or even strong enough to the government to listen?
It's interesting because we have to look at the issues that the so-called demonstrations are supposed to address.
Yes.
The first issue is the cost of living. And you've heard Dismas talk about the cost of living, about being able to afford the electricity bill, being able to eat 3 square meals a day, being able to take your kids to school, being able to afford university fees. These are the questions that Kenyans are facing. So in that regard, is there something that Azimio can say they want to demonstrate about and Kenyans will take them seriously about? Yes, there is. The second issue was the issue of the servers. Now, unfortunately for Azimio, it seems the Kenyan people are suffering from so much hunger. And I've heard the story of electoral injustice for so long that they're at the point where they're apathetic to it. It does not affect them. But the third issue, the third ingredient, is the question whether Azimio and its leader Raila Odinga have the gravitas, the push with the Kenyan people to actually pull off such a demonstration. And given the rallies that we've seen, yes, they have the capacity. But on the other side, the government seems to have an ace that it pulls out every time the name Raila Odinga is mentioned. And that ace is to say that Raila Odinga wants a handshake, and once he gets a handshake, he will leave the people who supported him high and dry. Now, fortunately or unfortunately for Raila Odinga, he did have a handshake with Mwai Kibaki. He walked out Prime Minister of the Republic of Kenya. He had a handshake with Uhuru Kenyatta. He walked out of it as the representative of the AU on infrastructure. And we have seen a history. Now, there are people who have the persuasion that these handshakes are for personal benefit for Raila Odinga. And that, therefore, lets out some steam in the Azimio narrative. If it's another pursuit for a handshake, then the train, the juggernaut they're trying to build, loses steam. However, if truly they are going to continue carrying the mantle of the cost of living and it being dealt with as soon as possible, then I will tell you they have the ear of every Mwananchi who's hungry. But if they focus solely on the issue of servers, then they need to be remembered, to be reminded that number one, the Kenyan people are starving, and it's very hard to think about election malpractice when you're hungry. And then number two, the Kenyan people have grown apathetic. In fact, I remember the words of a lady who said just a day after election, alisema, Raila, usikuja utuambie umeibiwa tena kwa sababu pia wewe ungeiba. In other words, she was simply saying that is no longer going to fly with us. But the issue of the cost of living, the issue of how much electricity costs in this country is an issue that is burning the heart of every Kenyan. And both the government and the opposition need to sit squarely, look themselves in the mirror, and actually realize that they need to address this issue before this country possibly goes the Sri Lanka way.
Do you think the issues are being addressed as you would anticipate or expect, Dismas?
Yes, you know,
by both factions.
Yeah, both Kenya Kwanza are addressing the strategy as well as Azimio. But let's look at the cost of living. The cost of living in Kenya is largely because of two factors. The Ukraine-Russia crisis, which has affected the global supply chains, and then our local issues. Now, expecting the Kenya Kwanza administration to manage those international variables is really been on the extreme side, because when the cost of international commodities keep on fluctuating, there's nothing much Kenya can do. However, for our own local issues, again, it would be very naive to imagine that one can clean tables within 6 months. If somebody wants to start judging Kenya Kwanza, give them at least 1 year. Then you can you can go to the top of Mount Kenya or Kilimanjaro and look at the scoreboard and say, you've been in 1 year, and within 1 year, you have not been able to make progress. But the economic crisis that Kenya has been facing, that Kenya Kwanza has been cleaning the tables, who are the architects? Who took economic decisions that created this? Obviously, if you speak to majority of people within Kenya Kwanza, they'll tell you that in fact it's President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga. They're the ones who are running the show for 5 years, and those decisions are having an impact today. So for me, I think for anybody who wants to look at Kenya Kwanza, whether they've been a success or a failure, give them 1 year. Then secondly, when you come to the elections and the electoral justice or injustice, what we are witnessing in Kenya is no different from what happened in Brazil not long ago, when the president won elections, and then the former president said, wait a minute, there is a mischief. In fact, there were demonstrations in their state offices, and also it reminds you of Donald Trump. Knowing very well that he lost an election, he proactively supported an insurrection. And I think when our elected leaders continuously keep on disrupting and disputing our elections, they undermine democracy. Because democracy is underpinned by free, fair elections. So when you say that the presidential elections were not free, they were not fair, they did not reflect the will of the people, and you do not provide the evidence, then people begin to wonder. And you recall Mr. Raila Odinga was given the opportunity to go to the Supreme Court and deliver his evidence. He did not. Then 6 months later, he says he now has a fresh evidence from a whistleblower who remains anonymous, because people would want to actually socialize with this evidence. Can you place it on the table? And then when he tells the president to open the servers, is this suggesting that in fact President Ruto is the one who was running IBC? And we all know that elections in Kenya, the minor K ruling, elections in Kenya, we know where they are held, and we know the results are posted. In fact, during the entire election, anybody who had capacity to do basic arithmetic would have done the numbers. Now, if Raila Odinga keeps on insisting that he's got new evidence, can he actually place this evidence on the table so that Kenyans can interact with that evidence? And the reason why that is very important, the majority of Kenyans who are victim to these politics, the one of deceit, fake news, propaganda, all that kind of stuff. And when Raila keeps on repeating every single day that his elections were stolen, in as much as he does not provide evidence, there's a part of Kenya that in fact will believe his election was compromised. And I think the challenge today is for him to present that evidence. He can actually go to the High Court or the Supreme Court and present that evidence so that Kenyans can clear their mind. Because if we don't address this issue today, there's a very high chance that at the next presidential election, the turnout might be compromised. And nobody wants to compromise the election. But again, one would understand the reason why Mr. Raila Odinga cannot accept that he lost the election. Because if he does accept, then he will suffer from brand dilution, and his political capital will go down the drain.
Yeah.
And the contradiction is the majority of the Azimio elected leaders actually recognize President Ruto, and they are working with him. Some governors have in fact given the Azimio meetings a wide berth. You recall not long time ago they were in Trans Nzoia,
yes,
but the local governor did not bother to show up. A number of his MPs, when the president was visiting Nyanza, the MPs had conversations, or rather the MPs as well as governors, they had conversations, identified the priority areas, and presented their memoranda to President Ruto in the official governor's letterhead. And then they've gone back to State House to do follow-ups. And a number of those MPs, like the Uriri MP, Honorable Mark Nyimita, these are people on the ground, they're very solid, and they're delivering for Wananchi. So a number of them have told Mr. Raila Odinga, wait a minute, you could be having disputes with President Ruto, but we recognize him as the president of the Republic of Kenya, and we are going to engage with him. So it's incumbent on Raila Odinga to present that evidence, because when you say whistleblower, amorphous, without placing it on the table, then people will not take you seriously.
Mchachi, and talking about also addressing these issues, when you say this government is also incorporating prayers into addressing issues, the weekly weekend prayers, weekend meetings, or rather meetings that have been argued over and above as to their functionality and the intent, and also now when you hear that there is the establishment of faith diplomacy, and at least being submitted to PSC for such, do you think that these are some of the issues that at the time Kenyans would want handled in that manner?
That's a difficult question.
Why?
Not difficult in logic, difficult in dealing with the emotions of Kenyans.
Okay.
The emotions of Kenyans are such that prayer is a highly welcome activity. In fact, if you went to the club right now, where people are playing all manner of music, and you put on a Christian jam, like Akisema Atakubariki, they will dance, they will lift their hands, as drunk as they are, they will praise Jesus. Kenya as a nation is obsessed with spirituality. We love to have an excuse to pray. In fact, we pray so hard for drivers that we change the driver. We say, where driver si dereva, Yesu when your dereva utaendesha yo basi. That is how deep prayer is entrenched into the Kenyan psyche. So when you want to critique, not criticize, critique, because they'll tweet me after this. If you want to critique such an activity, you have to walk gingerly on eggshells, because talking about prayer is equal to many as to abusing God himself, but that is not the case. The question is, if you say people must fast every Wednesday, do people fast because their boss has said so, or because they're convicted in their hearts to fast? Number two, when you say you will hire people to pray, how will we measure prayer? What will be the KPI? How will we know between Maringa and Dismas here who is the prayer warrior and who is the prayer coward? How will we know this person who's praying, his prayer is the one God will listen to, and not the other? And what training do you need to have? What certificate will you show? Will you come with very crusty knees and say, I've been on my knees for a whole week? We are not Muslim, so we will not have that mark of... So how will we measure these things? But beyond that, the age-old question arises, and that question is, from what point Do we become prayers? And when do we become doers of the word? That is the question. Because at some point, some action needs to be taken. So I'll give you an example. We are praying for rain. At the same time, we are the same Kenyans who are cutting down trees. Same Kenyans. We are praying for rain. We are the same people who are diverting our rivers and stopping how they work. The Mau forest has been destroyed. So how will God answer your prayer? You cannot be saying, God, heal me, and you're busy cutting your legs off. You have to pick a struggle. So there needs to be a balance. I think it is important that a nation prays. But I think the country Kenya, in as much as we are praying for rain, can we also please pray for some brains? Because what is lacking in this country is brains. We need akili. We need to think. The era of rain-fed agriculture needs to end. We need to think about this country. So good, let's pray for rain. But let's also pray for brains. And also, let's be very careful. Because those prayer warriors better be chosen by God, not the civil service. I doubt they have the capacity to choose. Because the Bible says we know not how to pray. So I wonder who these are who know how to pray.
I mean, Mako, for a government that has alluded that, they got into power through prayers, what do you make about this whole conversation?
Kenya is a secular state, but our national anthem is in fact a prayer. O God of all creation, Mungu yetu. So when all state functions start with the national anthem, that's a very solid prayer which is captured in our constitution. And again, there's a saying from the West that it's all fair in love and war. So you can discuss love and you can discuss war. But an issue that is very ticklish is the issue of religion, prayer, and faith. If you look at majority of the world wars or even civil strife across the world, it's because of faith. So I don't have capacity to discuss this issue of prayers. Because this is...
You're not a prayer warrior.
No, this is a conversation that you're supposed to have with your creator. So when somebody tells you that I'm praying, you have no capacity to establish whether or not, number one, they're genuine, whether they're using it for mischief, or whether it's actually an operation. Because again, in Kenya, we've actually not Kenya, globally, we have this thing called the prosperity gospel, whereby a pastor will tell you that give me 10% of your income or give me a certain percentage. And even if you don't have today, please commit that when you get resources, you're going to send it back. You remember those conversations. So I think to use Mark's description is that one will be walking on eggshells when you start discussing religion. If you go to the Middle East and you start discussing religion, you'll find yourself stopping a bullet easily. And I've seen some clips from parts of Africa where you have a pastor telling adult mature men and women to lie prostrate, pouring water on them, giving them a beating. So if you want to subject all these things to logic or reason, then you will find yourself in trouble, because you may begin to ask yourself, why did our forefathers go to the top of Mount Kenya or Kilimanjaro to go and pray? Why do people go to church on Sunday? Now, in my case, why do people go to church on Saturday? Why do some people don't enjoy alcoholic beverages and others don't? So you'll be walking into a dicey situation. But as a nation, what we must do as always is secure our national interest and public interest. That while prayer is good, faith is good, everything is, but where the rubber meets the road is that all these activities we are doing, coming up with policy interventions, using prayers, are we addressing our insecurities? Are we addressing our food insecurity, healthcare, the cumulative bits? I think that's what would be important, because if you start discussing religion here, everybody says my religion or my prayers are the best. So how do you even develop a matrix? Then you start saying these are the useful prayers, these are the useless ones. So I think that is something which is supposed to be left to a personal need. But the leadership of the nation has got the unique opportunity to define for us, where are we today? Where do you want us to go? How do you get top human capital and allocate financial resources to achieve those objectives.
I just have just one more point to add. I've been pondering to myself, let's say we set a goal to pray for rains. When the rains come, who will be given credit for the prayer? Is it the people who prayed with the war? Is it the people who prayed on a Tuesday? Is it the people at your local church? How do we, when you make such a thing a public service, so at the end of the year when you're giving that Elder of the Golden Heart Award, EGH, or CBS for that matter, how will you know it is Maringa's prayers? If Maringa did not pray that day, surely you do not have read. You know,
Maringa, as I indicated earlier on, I don't have capacity to discuss prayers and faith and these complicated issues because some of them border on these metaphysical things that one may not understand. But again, on the flip side, it would be extreme of anybody to start castigating prayers, maybe because you don't understand how they work, or maybe you don't associate with prayers. Then you remember when somebody doesn't like something, you look at those fruits, you declare them sour fruits, you say you're in buy. And to use the example you said about you dating, because you're not able to access this girl, you dismiss her.
But you see,
so we shouldn't dismiss prayers simply because we don't understand them.
The issue, I'm not dismissing prayers. In fact, I have said, what if the prayers worked? Because prayers do work. But you have turned it into a public service. How then will you know that this prayer has worked effectively, and therefore this is the person who should be promoted in rank from junior intercessor to senior principal intercessor?
I think now, I think Makina is going on the extreme with
it's not an extreme
with these prayers.
If you make it a public service.
No, it's not as if now you're going to have a huge blackboard at Uhuru Park to say, okay, these are 10 guys who are supposed to pray. So if it rains on Monday, it's Maringa. If it rains on Tuesday, it's this must know. I think now Mark is really, actually is now politicizing prayers to drive a certain agenda.
Let me tell you, I'm not driving whose agenda, the devil's agenda.
Just a minute. You know, I'm Catholic, and the Pope.
I thought you SD, you just said on Saturday.
No.
Or you just said Saturday
I'm
in your
Catholic.
case.
I'm Catholic. No, in Kisi, the predominant is Catholic and SDA, where I come from. Now, the Pope noticing that there is a crisis in DRC.
Yes.
He decided to have an episcopal visit to come to DRC so that he can shed global attention. For everybody to know that there's a war in Ukraine, everybody is paying attention, but you have forgotten what is what, that DRC is in a crisis. Then he also gathered a number of other leaders. He went to South Sudan, where he met the powerful leaders with the two other heads of, I think, the Church of Scotland and England, and they had prayers. Now you saw what happened the day before yesterday when the President Salva Kiir decided to fire the defense minister in violation of the treaties they have been signing. Somebody in a WhatsApp group similar to Mark will say the Pope's prayers were not answered because these two leaders, instead of respecting the prayers, they've decided to dishonor the treaty, so it's going to be chaos. So it may be that's what I'm saying, that issues of prayers, it's not an accurate science that 1 + 1 is 2. So in prayers, 1 + 1 can be 10. So one has to be very careful when you're having that conversation.
And that is why I insist
as we end up on this story,
you cannot make prayers a civil service.
Okay.
The reason I am using hyperbole, in case it was lost on Dismas, is sometimes to make people understand a thing, you must give them vivid examples. Because you will need, for any tax cent that is spent, when you say we are spending money on a road, we need to come and be able to measure the road and know exactly what it has done. If you hire dancers, you tell them you will dance on the dance floor for 15 minutes starting now, and you will time 15 minutes. Prayer, according to Dismas's own example, is an intangible and quantifiable And therefore, we cannot bring it into public service. Prayer is not an Azimio issue. It is not a UDA issue. In fact, it is also not a Kenya issue. It is a God issue. It is a personal relationship between you and God. And for those who read the Bible, they know Jesus described how to pray. He said, go to your room, get into your closet, pray there, and when you pray in secret, your Father who sees what is in secret will reward you in the light. So we cannot disregard what the Bible says and then pretend to make into a civil service something that is of a spiritual service and of a higher calling than even the calling of president.
You know, Maringa, in my view, if there's anybody in this world, a Muslim, a Christian, Buddhist, whichever religion it is, if you believe in the power of prayer, please go ahead and pray. There's nothing wrong. Because we cannot start subjecting prayers to logic. As indicated, it's not 1 + 1 that you get 2. 1 + 1 can be 100. So if you believe in the power of prayer, please go ahead.
Indeed. Now, you've talked about public service Bichachi, and we did see this past week the interviews for the CAS positions have begun. They are ongoing. What do you make of the shortlist? The shortlist that was made public by the Public Service Commission, and what would be your anticipation or expectations for these executive, for the CASs when they come in? Does it look like still a case of rewarding political friends, or is it more about also service delivery? And also, when you consider the narrative of hustler, nation, the Mamambogas, did you see such names featuring on that list?
So let me start here. First and foremost, I'm one of those people when the CS position was established, when it was taken to court and removed, and now I have the same stand.
Yes.
Why do I have the same stand? I have the stand that the ministers and the PSs have so much work. Do they need people to share those responsibilities with? They do. Is Kenya better when we have more people at the top being able to deal with issues? Yes, it is better. So I have one of those people who I did not criticize CSs under Uhuru. I'm not going to criticize the position under William Ruto. And the reason for that is there's a sound logic for it. However, there are two things that I found quite interesting. Number one, it was the tendency of people who've held high office before wanting to be CASs. I think at some point, leaders in this country need to know when to exit the stage. Seeing ex-governors there, seeing ex-senior officials seeking for this position, I think is a bit of a misnomer. Number two, did I see a Mamamboga there? I don't have a list of Mamambogas, so I do not conclusively know whether there was a Mamamboga there or not. However, what I did see is I saw a lot of powerful people, and I really wondered to myself, do we want to make the CAS position what it was before, a training ground where you get people who can lead there in future, or do we want to continue to make it where people who've already led get an opportunity to lead again? Thirdly, this country, we need to make a very interesting decision.
Yes.
We need to make the decision whether, when we win power, every office and every opportunity is for people who supported you. Or, when you win power, your office is the office for every Kenyan. It's a decision we need to make, because it's not legal or illegal either way. When our deputy president said that there is a line to get plum government jobs, and his job is to make sure only the supporters get this job, it is within his right to do so. But the question we need to ask ourselves is that the Kenya we want? That next time when it is Dismas's party winning, then it's only Dismas's friends like me who will get positions. It is a deep question we need to ask ourselves, because is political competition enmity? We are taking political competition as though it was a coup that happened and now you need to purge the system of the people who supported your previous leader. We need to be very careful, because the idea, if we continue to pursue this road where we are not holding both hands, we want to hold only one hand, what we will create is we have a winner-take-it-all situation. Now we will have a winner-take everything situation, and it's something we need to be very careful about. That is in answer of your chronism question. We need to be able to reach across the aisle when we win power and show people that it is a government by Kenyans for Kenyans, and not a government of Azimio or UDA.
So you would have wished to see more Azimio, members?
No. Okay. No. Azimio people have no right. Like, for example, Raila Odinga cannot be. What I mean is that it should not be so overt that this is a UDA only affair, right? Because there are people in Azimio who are competent, who are not running for office, right? They were not running for office and they supported Azimio. That is different from choosing Azimio leadership. There are people that are Kenyan. Your political choice should not disenfranchise you economically from opportunities in the next government.
This must you agree?
All over the world, when there's a new administration, when you get a new prime minister, in case of a parliamentary democracy, or a president, in case of a presidential democracy, there are a number of public servants of rank, highly placed, who are expected to present their resignations to the new administration, so that you give the new leader the opportunity to craft a team that identifies with his vision, a team that is not going to sabotage his vision. And we'll keep going back to the basic definition of leadership, that you identify a vision, you attract human capital, and you attract and you get financial resources. But in President Kenyatta identifying human capital, when you look at the appointments are largely reflect the face of Kenya. And now you have the supplementary budget, and you're going to have the budget. So he'll be able to drive Kenya in a particular agenda. Now, for a president to make a political appointees, it's not limited to Kenya. In the US, when a new president takes over, he's got about 4,000 appointments that he's supposed to make. The same for parliamentary democracies, like in the UK or in India, you come with your team. That, however, does not mean that you cannot pick talent from other parties that did not support you. Because at the end of the day, your biggest priority is to deliver for the entire nation. So you will pick the talent from wherever you're going to find it, provided the talent identifies with your vision and they're not going to sabotage you. It will be responsible for any head of state or any president or a prime minister to pick talent whose priority is going to sabotage you. Then number two, Mark has raised a very fundamental issue. One begins to wonder, having served as a governor, say for 2 terms, why would you want to go back to being a CS? When I saw that shortlist, I sat back and prepared coffee, and I was asking myself, these people have served as governors, others 2 terms, others as public servants of high rank. What is this kind of insecurity are they suffering from? You really begin to wonder, is there something that Kenyans need to know? Now, outside those governors, then you've got a number of people with very high capacity and very high competence that I believe will assist the cabinet secretaries deliver on their mandates. And just like Mark has said, I come from this school that identify top talents, pay them top dollar, give them very high key performance indicators. So if they don't deliver, then you send them home. We are told part of the reason why Singapore is an amazing success and South Korea, actually Singapore first, that the Singapore president or the leadership in Singapore, they get top talent. They are paid top dollar and they are expected to deliver. So you've seen in some media reports saying that the cost of maintaining the CIS is going to be extremely high, but nobody has bothered to ask what are they going to deliver. If the delivery is going to be superior, there's nothing to be worried about their pay.
Indeed. As you wind up, because we have a few minutes before we close the show, when you look at the talk of, UDA party merging with other parties, to form one coalition. It was one of the stories in the bulletin earlier on, and there has been mixed reaction from sister parties of, the alliance to try and have this merger. Do you predict or do you foresee a situation where UDA could end up actually taking the direction of Jubilee, a party, whose members are, whose current members in UDA are also former members of Jubilee?
Well, it's a difficult question. I'll tell you why it's a difficult question. Number one, I'm one of those people that believe that Kenya desperately needs to have political parties that are entrenched in our political system. We need political parties that last the test of time. The idea that a political party can last one election and then it's gone the next is not a viable solution to how we do politics in this country. We need also political parties with ideologies and fixed ideas, the same way as in the United States when someone votes Democrat, they know they are voting for social welfare, they know they are voting for certain rights, they know what they are voting for. When you vote Republican, you're voting for smaller guns, smaller government, gun rights, and other things. So you know very well where you're voting. So yes, we need strong political parties. We don't need very many small political parties. However, we are in a very interesting position. We are in a position where we have seen the interest of certain political parties being willing to be folded, most recently Jubilee, willing to be folded up and delivered into the package that is UDA. What we need to guarantee, and I think UDA has the right to coalesce as many parties as they want, but what we need to safeguard and ensure continues in this country is multi-partism. We need to have, in fact, lasting multi-partism, parties that last a long time. We need to stop having special purpose vehicles, short-term service vehicles. We need to have parties that last a long time. So I agree, let UDA coalesce into a big party that will last the test of time. Similarly, let us guarantee that Kenyans, when they go to the ballot 2027, 2032, they will find UDA and other parties upon which they can cast their vote. That guarantee is very necessary.
Yeah, I think the long-term solution is really to have parties that are anchored on ideas. The tragedy we have had since independence, and you can talk about KANU, then you can talk about PNU, and you can talk about Jubilee, that political parties at some stage were huge, they were a big deal. But when the prominent personalities exit the stage, then they collapse. So we need to ask ourselves that is having political parties in Kenya largely anchored personality a sustainable strategy, or do we need to have them anchored on ideas? And I also noticed that there be that conversation that maybe we need to make sure that we maintain the multi-party politics. I think that's already part of our constitution, but the challenge would be on these powerful political personalities who form the parties to ensure that they're not the magnet in the political party, that in fact the magnet is a philosophy. You can talk about ANC in South Africa, you can talk about Chama cha Mapinduzi, from our neighbors, and then you can also talk about the Democrats and Conservatives or Labour. Let's have political parties that are anchored on very solid philosophies so that it doesn't matter with the political leadership. If you're the president, party leader, you do your 10 years, you take a walk, and then another person comes in. But the tragedy is, when you look at largely all the political parties in Kenya, there's actually no difference, apart from the way they've structured their philosophy. But in terms of ideology, it's really the same thing. Because you're pressed for time, I'll give you under a minute each for the closing remarks. Starting with you, Mark.
I think one of the things that Kenya needs to focus on and realize very quickly is that we have to stabilize. The stability we need is not a question of former government, current government. We are almost in a car that's about to have an accident. We need to find the brakes, we need to find the steering wheel, and we need to do so regardless of whether we want to blame whoever. We need to steer this car, and this car needs to be stable as soon as possible.
Now, Kenya needs people with capacity to solve problems. And Kenya Kwanza has been solving the problems. That's why we are getting economic stability and political stability. However, we've got another crop that is emerging who are creating problems. Now, you cannot start creating problems for Kenya today, trying to organize demonstrations, and then you create a crisis in the middle of this economic crisis. Because right now, the way the sailors say, all hands are supposed to be on deck. We solve the economic situation we have in Kenya, we address the drought situation so that people can start moving in one direction. But when Kenya Council wants to sort out these problems, and then you are creating problems, Kenya may end up mark-timing for a long time.
Thank you, gentlemen. I've been speaking to Mark Bichache, communication strategist, as well as Dismas Muko, a political analyst. And more than 10 years ago, the Constitution of Kenya 2010 was promulgated, signifying a new dawn. Tonight, I leave you with the words of the preamble of our Constitution, which scholars worldwide opine is one of the best forms of poetry. We, the people of Kenya, acknowledging the supremacy of the Almighty God of all creation, honoring those who heroically struggled to bring freedom and justice to our land, proud of our ethnic, cultural, and religious diversity, and determined to live in peace and unity as one indivisible sovereign nation, respectful of the environment, which is our heritage, and determined to sustain it for the benefit of future generations, committed to nurturing and protecting the well of the individual, the family, communities, and the nation, recognizing the aspiration of all Kenyans for a government based on the essential values of human rights, equality, freedom, democracy, social justice, and the rule of law, exercising our sovereign and inalienable right to determine the form of governance of our country, and having participated fully in the making of this constitution, adopt, enact, and give this constitution to ourselves and to our future generations. God bless Kenya. My name is George Maringa. Have a good night.